Eu quero passar a palavra, então, para a professora Pauline, que vai nos honrar com a sua fala. Tenho certeza que vamos aprender muito. Seja bem-vinda. Obrigada pela sua presença.
Hello, and thank you very much for an extremely interesting talk about matters going on in your court that are quite unusual, and I would say at the avant-garde, not to be found most places. So congratulations on that, and thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm getting used to this translation idea. Anyway, it is a great honor for me to be here to talk with you about collaborative practice at this moment when collaborative practice movement is about to take root and take off here in Brazil, thanks to the work of some remarkable colleagues of those of you in the room, and many of them are here, especially Tanya and Olivia and Adolfo and Marcelo, who have done an extraordinary amount of work to lay a foundation for a very strong collaborative practice movement, which I hope that some of you in the room who may not be coming to this training will want to take advantage of the next time that you have an introductory training, because I'm hoping you're going to find it of interest. So, the collaborative practice movement, as I'm going to explain it to you, began in the United States, in the state of Minnesota, with a family lawyer, a family law specialist who was very good at what he did. His name is Stuart Webb. He's considered the godfather of collaborative law and collaborative practice. And everybody liked it when Stuart was one of the lawyers in a divorce case because he's a very gentle, kind, and peacemaking kind of a lawyer. But he couldn't stand seeing the impact on families of what happened with conventional methods of settling family law cases very close to the date of trial and very close to the courthouse steps. And so he declared what I like to refer to as unilateral disarmament, which was his inspiration that led to the collaborative movement. He said, if you want me to be the lawyer for the other side of your divorce cases, you have to promise not to go to court. Because if you go to court, I'll quit. I won't stay on the case. That was the inspiration that has led to the movement that's now about to flower here in Brazil. But what Stuart Webb did in 1990 very quickly spread to California, and we Californians like to change things when they come our way and put our own stamp on it. So in San Francisco in 1993, I heard about it, and my colleague Peggy Thompson was working in the realm of court-annexed psychologists who do the kinds of psychological studies that we just heard about. And she and her colleagues were deciding that they had not got their doctoral degrees in psychology in order to go to court and tell people who was a good parent and who was not a good parent. So there was a lot of fermentation going on in the air about where is the best place for families to be resolving divorce issues. In San Francisco, in California, we took Stuart Webb's idea. What if the lawyers simply couldn't go to court? What if the lawyers were hired by the divorcing couple only for so long as they were working constructively to resolve their issues themselves with our help? And what we added to it was the work of mental health professionals who, instead of doing psychological evaluation reports, they said, what if we didn't do reports? What if instead we adapted to a coaching model where we become allies to the couple, helping them to deal with their emotional distress, helping them to improve their communication skills, and working side by side with lawyers. And then the third piece fell into place of what we now know as the collaborative practice movement. We added financial planners, financial consultants to this team, and this became what is now known as internationally known as the interdisciplinary collaborative practice movement, and I'm going to tell you more about that later. This movement grew extremely quickly. In California, we started talking about it in 1993. By 1997, Peggy Thompson and I and several other people, about 12 of us, were meeting regularly for a lunch date once a month to talk about how we could support one another in doing this very new and untried model of staying out of court and working in interdisciplinary teams. And we decided, how about if we start an organization? We could call it the California Association of Collaborative Professionals, because it was only in California that members of 3 professions were working together instead of just lawyers. So we said, what if we make an organization? And we started the work of incorporating a nonprofit organization, a non-governmental organization that would be called the California Academy of Collaborative Professionals. But before we could complete the paperwork, this idea took off so quickly that then we had to amend the papers to say, well, let's call it the United States Academy of Collaborative Professionals. But before we could complete the paperwork again, we had to change it because suddenly it was international. So within about a year or two of our starting that organization, it was now the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals. And that's the umbrella organization that exists today. It began with 12 people. By 1999, we had our first convention or conference, and we had 50 people, which we thought was pretty amazing. But today, not that very much later, about 15 years later, we're going to have our 15th annual meeting in Vancouver, Canada, in October, and we now have over 5,000 members from all 3 professions in 27 different nations. So this has been an extraordinarily rapid growth of a movement, and the reason why is that family lawyers know that the things we learn to do in law school to help families through divorce simply don't work very well. This is an idea that every family lawyer recognizes makes sense, makes more sense. But I do want to tell you a little bit more about the movement before I get into the details of how the model works and why it's so important. Now that we've been teaching it and taking it to now 27 countries, I can tell you that as in this country, where you are receiving support at the very highest level of your judicial system, that's been true elsewhere as well. Supreme Court justices across the United States have given their support to it. The President of the Irish Republic, the Israeli Ministry of Justice, the Attorney General of Australia. We have what's called a Uniform Collaborative Law Act in the United States, which is being adopted all over the country. So this is a movement that's taking root because it's the right way, we feel, to help people do a constructive, self-determined way of divorcing. So now I'm going to move into a more general background of why collaborative practice seems to be such a right way to go about helping families. And I'm going to give you the theoretical background, and then I'm going to get into how the model works a little bit. Every divorce lawyer knows that we are dealing with clients who are experiencing a major catastrophe. The collapse of a marriage, of an intimate relationship, of an intimate partnership, is one of the worst things that can happen to a human being. The level of stress is enormous. So the saying goes that criminal lawyers see bad people at their best, and divorce lawyers see good people at their worst because of the stresses that they're experiencing as they go through this huge life transition. Now, what our psychologist colleagues tell us about why this is so traumatic, they tell us that the impact, both physiologically and emotionally, of losing your life partner, especially if you weren't expecting it, and often about 50% of our clients were not expecting that they were going to get a divorce, the impact of it is said to be even more distressing, more traumatic than your spouse dying. That might seem an odd thing to say, but if you think about it, if your husband or your wife dies, there are all sorts of social conventions to help support the bereaved person who's left behind. And it's an understood human transition with many ways of helping people get through it. Whereas divorce is much more recent and still has a stigma or a sense of shame about it, a sense of failure. And when somebody gets divorced, their friends don't know how to respond. Their families don't know how to respond. And they're essentially left alone, or often the well-meaning friends and family members try to help in ways that make it worse, such as telling a wife that they always knew that their husband was no good, that kind of help, which is not really very helpful at all. So what we know is that this is not just that people are not feeling very happy about losing their marriage. These consequences have been measured in study after study. The biological and the psychological consequences are immense. And it's been astonishing to me as a divorce lawyer who has seen this to understand how much scientific evidence there is for the severity of this trauma. For example, there's a number of studies, which I won't be able to quote you today, that show that the physiological immune system is seriously compromised during the 2 to 3 years surrounding separation and divorce, so that both adults and children are admitted to hospitals for very severe illnesses such as stroke, heart attack, severe life-threatening asthma attacks, pneumonia. This is not just all in your mind. This is something that has a devastating impact to the physical organism. There are also studies about the impact on cognition, on the ability to think. And the studies have shown that the person who was rejected at the time of divorce experiences a drop of as much as 30 IQ points, intelligence quotient points, during the period surrounding separation and divorce. And this impairment lasts anywhere from 18 months to as long as 5 years after a separation. So, if you step back and think about it, our clients are being asked to do some of the most challenging intellectual decision-making that they've ever had to do in their whole lives, planning for the future financially and in terms of assets and in terms of parenting. And they're making decisions that have lasting consequences for their own lives and the lives of their children. And yet they're having to do so at a time when, and this is a big mouthful in English, I don't know how it translates to Portuguese, I can't find a better term for it, transient, diminished capacity. I hope that translates well. For the time that we work with them, they're really not able to think very well. And as I say, every divorce lawyer knows this. Here's some additional information that 21st century neuroscience has been able to add to the picture of what every divorce lawyer knows. We know now that our clients are experiencing prolonged states of fight or flight physiological responses because of the intensity of the grief, fear, anger, shame, humiliation, vengefulness that you experience when this primary human bond has suddenly severed and you weren't expecting it. Biologically speaking, our clients literally cannot think during much of the time that we represent them. So let's compare that information with what we were taught in law school. We were taught that divorce is a legal process with very strict standards for relevancy and for justiciability of issues. We were taught that divorcing clients are just like every other client. They're like Google versus Samsung. They're like an automobile personal injury collision. And that our job as litigators, as lawyers who represent them, is the same as for every other client, which is we're supposed to interview them very efficiently and with a directed purpose. And we're supposed to listen deductively so that we can spot facts and issues that are legal causes of action that a lawyer is allowed to bring in front of a judge. That's what we're taught to do. What were we taught in law school about emotions, which is the thing that our divorced clients are richest in? Well, managing emotions is not taught in any law school that I know of. It's not part of what's considered to be the essential education of a lawyer. So implicitly or explicitly on the job and in law school, we were taught that emotion is irrelevant. It's a distraction. It confuses the reasonable resolution of clean legal issues. It gets in the way. So we learn to ignore it. We lawyers hope that if we just wait a while, the emotion will go away and we can get back to the real job, the rational job of resolving issues dispassionately. But the question arises, what if the client's emotions refuse to be ignored? I'm sure it's happened to every lawyer in this room. Clients don't like to have their emotions ignored. Well, the more progressive of us, we learned that we could send our clients to a psychotherapist. So the therapist could then fix the client, and the client could come back into our offices already all fixed, and now they can think straight, and we can resolve those nice, clean legal issues. Or so we dream. we lawyers are very comfortable with the picture that I described for you for many reasons, but I'll suggest several of them. We chose law as a profession, most of us, because our temperaments, our personal temperaments and our skills match the characteristics of law as an institution. It's a hierarchical institution, it's rationalistic, and it's adversarial at its heart. We lawyers are very comfortable in an institution that was created over centuries by people who were pretty much just like ourselves. Rationalistic, comfortable with adversarial behavior. Here are some of the characteristics of the typical lawyer temperament, and I'm sure we'll recognize them. We are highly verbal. We have very strong deductive, logical reasoning skills. We are excellent at argumentation and rhetoric. We're very comfortable with the dynamics of power. And we are uncomfortable around emotion. Are you seeing a little bit of a contradiction here? Well, the temperament of lawyers, as I just described it, is not the temperament of most human beings. And there is a lot of research, again, to support what I'm about to say. Lawyers have a very different temperamental profile from the general population. The general population lives much more in feeling than in thinking. And this characteristic becomes very much more pronounced when our clients are experiencing high stress and strong emotion, which is pretty much all the time that we lawyers are asked to work with them. So, our clients' experience of divorce and recovery, I'm trying to demonstrate in this diagram that I'll show you up here. I don't have my little pointer. But on the upper left, you see an arrow going to the left, which says the date of the marriage. And you see a red line that's going I have a pointer, but let's, if you want to, if it's easy. That pointer is not making, we'll just deal with it. So what this chart shows, the red line, shows what happens to a client who is suddenly told one day by husband or wife, darling, oops, we're getting a divorce. Oh, the divorce crisis, the trauma hits. It's unexpected, and the functional level of competency of our clients goes down like that. So the vertical axis that you're seeing, the up and down axis, is whether the client can manage from day to day to do the things that they need to do to manage their lives. Their functional level of competency crashes very low. And our clients continue to sort of bounce up and down, good days, bad days, good days, bad days, for quite some time, until eventually they recover from the divorce trauma and they get back up to their functional level that existed before they learned, honey, we are getting a divorce. So it takes anywhere from 1 to 4 years, the horizontal axis, for that recovery process to happen. Why am I telling you all this? Because if we look at this slide, you see that square, that gray square. That is where the lawyer's work takes place. That's the condition that our clients are in when we family lawyers are asked to work with them. And those two arrows, the one down at the bottom on the left, those are pieces of paper that lawyers file that we believe mark the beginning and the end of a divorce. On the left is the filing of a divorce petition or complaint. Our client continues to be very impaired. And then after a while, a year or 2, or maybe 3, depending on your jurisdiction, another piece of paper gets filed. The file is closed. There's a judgment of divorce. And we lawyers think that we have completed a divorce process when the client has not even begun to recover from the actual journey of divorce that is a human experience rather than a piece of paper experience. So I'd like you to consider this pyramid that I've drawn for you. This pyramid represents all of the possible things that matter a lot to most divorcing clients. This would include things like money, of course, and like dividing up houses and cars, but it also includes children, extended family, friendship networks, neighborhoods, clubs, quality of life, personal values, self-respect, integrity, a lot of things. You see that red line? Up above that red line represents those things which court-annexed processes are able to resolve. what you can see is a great deal, in fact, most of what matters to most of our clients is not part of what a lawyer's traditional job description is. If we look at what the typical human needs and concerns of a divorcing couple would be, and we look at the legal system's capacity to meet those concerns with constructive services, what we find in the collaborative process as we think about it, is that there's a circular reasoning loop involved. Courts resolve issues that the law defines as legally cognizable, that judges can issue orders about. The human concerns that a client cares very much about, that are not justiciable by a judge, are not part of a lawyer's job description because judges can't make orders about them. So we ignore those concerns because it's not part of our job description. And we don't even notice how much of that pyramid that I showed you has been left out of the work with the clients during the divorce because we lawyers are so comfortable with that paradigm that I'm describing, where the lawyer's job description is just the tip of the pyramid, because we're comfortable in that institution and with its methods. What I want to suggest to you, that if we were starting from zero, a brand new culture that was just trying to figure out the best way to help people through divorce with professional services, no sane culture would create the system that we have in my country, in your country, and in every country I've ever visited. Nobody would create this system for resolving divorce-related issues because of so many human needs that can't be met in a system that was built to resolve conflicts between arm's length individuals, corporations, governmental entities. The system that we've inherited, that we've applied to divorce, was not made for divorce because divorce wasn't even permitted in any broad scale until well into the 20th century. So we're taking a new human problem and grafting it into an institution it doesn't fit in well. And really, how could a court system fit very well the needs of a divorcing couple and family? We're dealing with the rupture of the most intimate bond known to the human species, the fracturing of the deepest psychological attachment needs and connections. The divorce experience involves a person's sense of identity and self-worth being broken. And the way people react to that is they often regress to a very primitive defensive structure of survive, kill, or be killed, where thinking is not possible.